I, 34F, always knew my husband, Mark, saw me as something less. It was never overt, never something you could point a finger at and say, there, that is the moment he showed his true colors. It was in the small things. The way he would explain simple financial concepts to me, as if I were a child. The way he would pat my head when I offered an opinion on politics or business. He called it being protective. I called it being patronizing. We had been married for 10 years, and for 10 years I had played the part of the supportive, slightly naive wife. It was easier that way. It kept the peace. My career was demanding, and when I came home, I just wanted quiet. I let him manage the joint finances. I let him take the lead on investments. I let him believe he was the sole architect of our comfortable life. The truth was, I earned more than he did, but my income went into a separate account that I managed, a fact I had kept to myself for years. It was my safety net, my secret garden in a life that felt increasingly like a manicured, sterile lawn. The line was crossed on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, except for the letter that arrived in the mail. It was from a bank I did not recognize, addressed to both of us. It was a final notice for a loan payment. A loan for $50,000. I stood in the hallway, the paper trembling in my hand. My heart was a cold, hard knot in my chest. We had no loans. We were diligent savers, proud of our debt-free status. It was one of the few things Mark and I consistently agreed upon. I waited for him to come home. The letter placed squarely in the middle of the kitchen island where he could not miss it. He walked in, dropped his keys, and glanced at it. He did not even flinch. He just sighed, a long, theatrical sound of weary responsibility. You found that, he said, loosening his tie. I stared at him, my voice barely a whisper. What is this, Mark? It's nothing to worry about, he said. It's a business thing. An investment. I was going to tell you about it once it paid off. An investment? I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. You took out a $50,000 loan without telling me? Our names are on this. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. I handled it. It's my responsibility. You do not need to trouble your pretty little head with the details. That was it. That was the phrase that broke something inside me. Trouble your pretty little head. He had said it 1,000 times before, always with a smile, a gentle caress. This time it was a weapon. It was meant to put me in my place, to remind me that I was the wife, the supporter, the one who did not understand the complex world of men and money. I felt a surge of anger so pure and so hot, it almost made me dizzy. This was not just about a loan. This was about a decade of being underestimated, of being willfully misunderstood. He had used my desire for a peaceful home as a cover for his deceit. He had leveraged my silence against me. I decided then and there, standing in our pristine kitchen with a forgery notice in my hand, that the peace was over. The quiet was over. He had no idea who he was married to. He was about to find out. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply folded the letter and put it in my purse. We will talk about this later, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. He seemed pleased with my reaction, mistaking my calm for submission. He nodded, satisfied.
Good, he said.
I will make dinner. You just relax. I went upstairs to our bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just breathing. In and out. I was not panicking.
I was strategizing.
My life as I knew it had ended, and a new one was beginning. This one would not be quiet. This one would not be peaceful. This one would be a war, and it was a war I intended to win. He thought I was a lamb. He was about to meet the wolf. The next morning, I woke up before him. This was not unusual. I always got up early to prepare for my day. But this morning was different. There was a cold purpose humming in my veins. I made the coffee just like always. I put his favorite mug by the machine just like always. But while the coffee was brewing, I went into his home office. It was a room I rarely entered. He called it his sanctuary. The door was always closed. I had respected that boundary, believing it was about his need for a private workspace. Now I knew it was a vault. His secrets were in here. I started with his desk. It was meticulously organized, a testament to the orderly facade he presented to the world. But I was not looking for order. I was looking for chaos. I checked the drawers first. The top one was full of pens and paper clips. The second one held files, all neatly labeled. Taxes, household bills, car maintenance, it was all perfectly normal. Too normal. My heart was beating a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I was not scared. I was focused. I moved to the filing cabinet in the corner. It was locked. Of course it was locked. Mark was nothing if not predictable. I looked around the room. Where would a man like Mark hide a key? Not in a place of sentimental value. He was not a sentimental man. It would be somewhere practical, somewhere he thought was clever. I ran my hand along the top of the doorframe. Nothing. I checked under the desk blotter. Nothing. Then I saw it. Taped to the underside of the heavy oak desk, almost impossible to see unless you were on your hands and knees. A small, silver key. I felt a small, grim smile touch my lips. So predictable. I unlocked the filing cabinet. The drawers slid open with a quiet, expensive sound. The first two drawers were more of the same. Insurance policies, mortgage documents, things I already knew about. It was the bottom drawer that held the prize. It was stuffed with folders, none of them labeled. I pulled one out. It was full of bank statements. Statements from an account at a different bank, the same one from the loan letter. And the account was in his name only. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. Page after page. There were dozens of them, going back 5 years. I saw the pattern immediately. Small, regular transfers from our joint savings account to this secret account. At first, they were just a few $100s a month. But over the past year, the amounts had grown larger. $10,000 here. $15,000 there. And then I saw the withdrawal. $50,000, taken out 2 months ago. The same day the loan was originated. It was not an investment. He had not taken out a loan for a business deal. He had taken out a loan to replace the money he had stolen from our joint account, probably after the bank called him about the large withdrawal. He was covering his tracks. He was moving our shared assets into his own private fund. My blood ran cold. This was not just deceit. This was a calculated, long-term plan. He was systematically draining our finances. He was planning to leave. And he was planning to leave me with nothing but a mountain of debt created in my name. I photographed every single document in that drawer. Credit card statements for cards I did not know he had. Investment portfolios in his name, funded by our money. There was even a preliminary deed for a condo in another city. A city where his younger sister, Jessica, lived. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. He was not just leaving me. He was setting up a new life. A life built on the foundations of our shared past, a past he was currently pillaging. I put everything back exactly as I had found it. I locked the cabinet. I put the key back under the desk. I walked out of the office and closed the door, my phone heavy in my pocket with the weight of his betrayal. The coffee was ready. Mark was coming down the stairs, yawning. "Morning, honey," he said, smiling at me. "Something smells good." I looked at him, at his handsome, familiar face, the face of a man I had loved, a man I had trusted. And I felt nothing. No love.
No sadness.
Just a cold, clear resolve. "I made coffee," I said, handing him his mug. The war had begun. He just did not know it yet. That weekend, his mother, Eleanor, came over for her weekly Sunday dinner. She was a woman who wore her disapproval like a fine perfume. In her eyes, I had never been good enough for her perfect son. I was too independent, too focused on my career, not domestic enough. I had always tried to win her over, bringing her thoughtful gifts, cooking her favorite meals, listening patiently to her endless complaints about her friends. Now, sitting at the dining table, listening to her praise Mark's latest business venture, I saw her in a new light. She was not just a difficult mother-in-law. She was his accomplice. She had to know. The way she looked at me, with a mixture of pity and contempt, it was the look of someone who was in on a secret. A secret at my expense. "Mark was telling me about his new real estate project," Eleanor said. dabbing her lips with a napkin. It sounds so promising. He's always been so brilliant with money. Has he? I asked, my voice sweet as poison. He rarely discusses the details with me. He does not want me to trouble my pretty little head. Mark shot me a warning look from across the table. Eleanor just smiled, a tight, unpleasant little smile. Well, dear, she said, some things are best left to the men. It's a heavy burden, managing a family's finances. You should be grateful Mark is so capable. I wanted to show her the pictures on my phone. I wanted to see the smug look wiped from her face. But it was not time. Not yet. My plan required patience. It required him to get more confident, more careless. So I just smiled back. You are right, Eleanor, I said. I am very grateful, Mark relaxed, believing he had dodged a bullet. He thought my comment was a moment of petty sarcasm, a small rebellion that he had successfully quashed with a single look. He had no idea it was the first shot fired in a war he was destined to lose. He thought the battlefield was our finances. He was wrong. The battlefield was his own arrogance. And on that field, I was the expert. The next week, I made an appointment with a friend of mine from law school. Sarah was one of the sharpest divorce attorneys in the city. We met at a small cafe far from my neighborhood and my office. I had not told her why I wanted to meet. I just said I needed some advice. She greeted me with a warm hug. Chloe, it's so good to see you, she said. You look tired. Is everything okay? I took a deep breath.
Not really, Sarah, I said.
I think Mark is stealing from me. I saw the professional mask slip over her friendly face. She leaned forward, her voice low. Tell me everything, she said.
So I did.
I told her about the loan. I told her about the secret bank account. I showed her the pictures on my phone. She swiped through them, her expression growing more and more grim. When she was done, she put the phone down on the table and looked at me. Chloe, she said, her voice firm. This is not just stealing. This is a systematic effort to hide marital assets. This is fraud. The forged signature on the loan application is a criminal offense. I know, I said. What do I do? The first thing you do is protect yourself, she said. You need to move half of the money from your joint accounts into a new account in your name only. Immediately. You are legally entitled to it. Second, you need to gather more evidence. We have the bank statements, which is great. But we need more. We need proof that he intentionally deceived you. What kind of proof? I asked. Emails, text messages, anything where he lies to you about your finances. You need to create a paper trail. Ask him questions in writing. Ask him about the loan. Ask him about your savings. His lies will be our ammunition. The conversation with Sarah solidified my resolve. It was one thing to feel betrayed, but it was another to have the betrayal validated by a legal expert. I left the cafe with a clear set of instructions, a checklist for dismantling my husband's life. The first step was to ask him about the loan again, but this time via text message. That evening, as he sat on the sofa watching television, I typed out the message. I am still worried about that loan. Can you please tell me what the money was for? I have a right to know. I watched as he read the message. He sighed, a put-upon sound. He typed back a reply. I already told you. It's a short-term business investment. It will be paid back in a few months. Please stop worrying. I have it under control. I saved a screenshot of a message. One lie documented. It was a start. The next day, I went to our bank. The one we had used for years. I sat down with the branch manager, a woman I had known for a long time. I explained that I was doing a financial review and I needed copies of all transfer authorizations from our joint savings account for the past 2 years. She was happy to help. An hour later, I walked out with a thick envelope. At home, I spread the documents out on the guest room bed. And I found what I was looking for. For every large transfer to his secret account, there was a corresponding form. A form that required 2 signatures. My signature was on every single one of them. Except it was not my signature. It was a clumsy, amateurish forgery. Anyone could see it. He had not even tried to make it look authentic. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. He had not just stolen from me. He had used my identity to do it. He had signed my name over and over again, believing I would never find out. Believing I was too stupid, or too complacent, or too trusting to ever look. I felt a wave of nausea. This man slept in my bed. He kissed me good morning. And all the while, he was practicing my signature, planning his escape. The anger was back, cold and sharp. This was more than just a divorce. This was a reckoning. I took photos of every forged signature. I saved them to a secure cloud drive, along with everything else. My file on Mark was growing. It was a testament to his greed and his arrogance. And it was going to be his downfall. I needed to understand the full scope of his plan. The condo in his sister's city was a major clue. I had never been close with Jessica. She was younger than Mark, and she idolized him. She saw him as a successful, sophisticated man of the world, and she saw me as the boring, practical woman holding him back. I had no doubt she was involved in a scheme. I decided to call her. I had to be careful. I could not let her know that I suspected anything. I had to play the part of the concerned, slightly confused wife. I dialed her number, my heart pounding. She answered on the second ring. "Chloe," she said, her voice full of surprise. "Is everything okay?" "Hi, Jessica," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Everything is fine. I was just calling to chat. How are you?" We made small talk for a few minutes. I asked about her job, her apartment, her cat. She seemed relaxed, unsuspecting. Then I made my move. "You know," I said, trying to sound casual, "Mark mentioned he was thinking about investing in some property in your area. He thinks the market there is really going to take off." I held my breath, waiting for her reaction. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," she said. "He did." Her voice was just a little too high, a little too bright. "That's interesting. He has not said anything to me about it." It was a lie. A clumsy, obvious lie. I knew it instantly. If her brother was planning to buy a condo in her city, she would be the first person he would tell. She would be helping him look. Her denial was a confession.
She was in on it.
"Oh, well, maybe it's just an idea he's toying with," I said, backtracking smoothly. "You know how he is. Always thinking about the next big thing." "Right," she said, sounding relieved. "Totally. That sounds like Mark." We ended the call a few minutes later. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. She was a terrible liar. That was good. It meant she would be easy to break. But her involvement made the whole situation feel so much uglier. This was not just my husband betraying me. It was his family. They were all in on it together, a little club of thieves laughing at me behind my back. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, next to the man who was methodically destroying my life, and I felt a profound sense of loneliness. I had no one. My family lived on the other side of the country. My friends were our friends, a group of couples who would undoubtedly side with the charming, successful Mark over the quiet, reserved Chloe. Except for Sarah. I had Sarah, and I had myself. That was the thought that finally calmed me down. I had myself. I had spent the last 10 years making myself smaller to fit into Mark's world, hiding my intelligence, my ambition, my strength. I did it for the sake of peace, for the sake of our marriage. But the marriage was a lie, and I was done being small. I got out of bed and went back into his office. This time, I was not looking for financial documents. I was looking for something else, something more personal. I logged onto his computer. It was not password protected. Another sign of his arrogance. He did not think I had the nerve or the intelligence to snoop. I went straight to his email. I started searching. I searched for his sister's name. I searched for the name of his lawyer, a man I had met at a few holiday parties. I searched for the word divorce, and then I found it. An email chain between Mark and his mother, Eleanor. The subject line was the plan. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The emails went back 6 months. They were discussing his exit strategy in cold, brutal detail. He was going to continue moving assets until he had secured the majority of our wealth. Then, he was going to file for divorce, claiming I was emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible. He was going to use the loan as proof that I was racking up debt behind his back. Eleanor was encouraging him every step of the way. "She never deserved you, my darling boy," she wrote in one email. "It's time for you to be free. Take what you are owed." I felt a black rage build in my chest. It was so much worse than I had imagined. This was not just a man leaving his wife. This was a conspiracy. They were not just taking my money. They were trying to destroy my reputation. They were trying to leave me with nothing, not even my own good name. I forwarded the entire email chain to a new, secret email address I had created for myself. I then deleted the forwarded message from his sent items and cleared his trash. He would never know I had seen it. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the monitor lighting up my face. The loneliness was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a diamond-hard core of anger. They thought they could break me. They thought I would crumble. They had made a fatal miscalculation. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my silence for ignorance. I was not just going to divorce Mark. I was going to dismantle his entire life. I was going to take back everything he had stolen from me and more. I was going to make him and his mother and his sister regret the day they ever decided to cross me. I was a lawyer. A damn good one. I had spent my entire career fighting for other people. Now it was time to fight for myself. And it was a fight I was going to win. The next phase of my plan required me to play a part. I had to be the worried, slightly hysterical wife he was painting me as. I had to make him believe his narrative was working. It was the most difficult thing I have ever had to do. I started small. I would accidentally let a dish slip and shatter on the floor, then burst into tears. I would forget to pay a bill, then act panicked when the reminder notice came. Mark, of course, was a pillar of calm, condescending strength through it all. There, honey," he would say, wrapping an arm around me. "Don't get so worked up. It's just a plate. I will take care of the bills from now on. You clearly have too much on your mind." He was so proud of himself. He thought he was playing me like a fiddle. He had no idea I was the one conducting the orchestra. His mother, Eleanor, was a frequent visitor during this time. She would come over with casseroles and concerned looks, her eyes full of false sympathy. "Poor dear," she would say to me, patting my hand. "You seem so overwhelmed lately. Are you sure you are feeling all right?" We would sit at the kitchen table, the two of them exchanging knowing glances over my head, convinced of my impending breakdown. One afternoon, Eleanor was particularly bold. "You know, Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern, "sometimes, when a woman is under a lot of stress, she can become forgetful. Especially with money. It might be a good idea for Mark to handle everything for a while. Just until you are feeling more like yourself." I looked at her, this woman who had encouraged her son to ruin me, and I felt a surge of loathing so intense it almost choked me. I wanted to tell her that I knew everything. I wanted to see her face when I played her the recording I had secretly made of our conversation. But I held my tongue. I just looked down at my hands and whispered, "Maybe you are right." Mark and Eleanor shared a triumphant look. They thought they had won. They thought I had finally surrendered. They were getting ready for the final act of their little play. And I was getting ready for the curtain to fall, right on top of them. The final piece of evidence I needed was something concrete, something that could not be explained away. The forgeries were good. The emails were damning. But I wanted something more. I wanted his voice. I wanted a recording of him admitting his plan. I knew it would be difficult. He was careful. But his arrogance was his weakness. He loved to brag, especially to his mother. I just had to give him the right opportunity. I decided to use their shared belief in my instability against them. I told Mark that I was feeling anxious and that I wanted to go visit my sister for a week to clear my head. He was delighted. It was the perfect opportunity for him to finalize his plans without me underfoot. He probably thought I would have a complete breakdown while I was away, further solidifying his case. "Of course, honey," he said, his voice full of fake sympathy. "That's a wonderful idea. You go and relax. Do not worry about a thing here. I will handle everything." Before I left, I bought a small, voice-activated recorder, the kind journalists use. It was tiny, no bigger than a tube of lipstick. I hid it in the faux plant on the credenza in the living room, a spot where he and Eleanor always sat to have their evening cocktails when she visited. I set it to record, and then I packed my bags. I did not go to my sister's. I went to a small hotel on the other side of the city. A hotel where I paid in cash and registered under a different name. For a week I worked. I organized my evidence. I drafted the initial legal filings. I cross-referenced the forged transfer documents with his secret bank statements, creating a perfect, undeniable timeline of his theft. And I waited. I knew Eleanor would not be able to resist coming over to gloat with her son now that the unstable wife was out of the way. I was right. On the third day, I saw from the hotel parking lot that her car was parked in our driveway. I waited until she left, then I drove home, my heart pounding. I retrieved the recorder, my hands trembling slightly. I went back to the hotel, and I plugged it into my laptop. And I listened. The sound quality was crystal clear. I heard the clink of ice in glasses. I heard Eleanor's shrill laugh. And then I heard their voices. She bought it hook, line, and sinker, Mark said, his voice thick with smug satisfaction. She's probably crying her eyes out at her sisters right now. Thinks a week of fresh air is going to solve her problems. Eleanor laughed again. Poor, simple girl. She never had a clue. When are you going to file the papers? Next week, as soon as she gets back, Mark said. My lawyer says we have a solid case. The loan, her recent erratic behavior, we will make it look like she drove the marriage into the ground with her spending and her instability. The judge will give her next to nothing. And the house? Eleanor asked. The house is as good as mine, Mark said. I have been paying the mortgage from my personal account for the last 6 months. It will look like I was the only one contributing. She will be lucky if she gets a few pieces of furniture. Then came the part that made my blood run cold. The part that sealed his fate. What about the forgeries? Eleanor asked, her voice a little lower now. Are you sure that was a good idea? It was brilliant, Mark said, his voice full of pride. There is no way she will ever be able to prove it. It's her signature. As far as the bank is concerned, she authorized every single transfer. By the time she even thinks to question it, the money will be long gone, and I will be living comfortably in my new condo. She will be buried in debt and legal fees. She can't even afford a lawyer, he laughed. A cruel, ugly sound. She will be ruined. I stopped the recording. I did not need to hear any more. I had it. His confession. His mother's complicity. The entire, sordid plan, laid out in his own arrogant words. I saved the audio file to my secure drive, along with everything else. The case was complete. It was ironclad. There was no defense. There was no escape. All that was left was the confrontation. He thought I could not afford a lawyer.
He was right.
I did not need to afford one. I was the lawyer, and court was now in session. I came home at the end of the week, playing the part of the refreshed, but still fragile, wife. Mark was attentive, solicitous, the perfect concerned husband. He had no idea that in 2 days, his world was going to be turned upside down. As he had planned, he had his lawyer serve me with divorce papers the following Monday. He did it at the breakfast table, a gesture of maximum cruelty disguised as efficiency. He handed me the envelope with a sad, pitying look on his face. I am so sorry, Chloe, he said, his voice a perfect imitation of regret. I just do not think I can do this anymore. You have not been yourself for a long time. I think this is for the best. I took the envelope. I did not open it. I just looked at him. I see, I said, my voice quiet. You have a lawyer? Yes, he said. A man named Stephen Croft. He's very good. He will be in touch with whoever you find to represent you. The condescension in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. He was already imagining his victory, imagining me, broke and alone, struggling to find a second-rate lawyer I could not afford. All right, Mark, I said. I stood up from the table. I will see you at the preliminary hearing. He looked surprised by my composure. He had expected tears, pleading, a dramatic scene. My calm unnerved him. Chloe, he started to say. Do not, I said, my voice suddenly as sharp as glass. Do not speak to me again unless it is through your lawyer. I walked out of the room, leaving him sitting at the table, a look of confusion on his face. The first crack in his perfect facade. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. It was to be held in family court, a place I knew all too well. Not from personal experience, but from my professional life. For the past 12 years, I had not been a quiet, unassuming wife. I had been Chloe Evans, senior counsel at one of the top litigation firms in the country. I specialized in corporate fraud. I dismantled complex financial schemes for a living. I broke arrogant, powerful men on the witness stand. Mark thought he was a brilliant financial mind. To me, his little scheme was child's play. He had no idea the kind of storm he had unleashed. The day of the hearing, I dressed carefully. I chose a simple, dark blue suit. It was a suit that radiated quiet authority. I did my hair and makeup with precision. I was not dressing for my husband. I was dressing for the judge. I walked into the courthouse alone. I saw Mark standing with his lawyer, Stephen Croft, and his mother, Eleanor. They were all laughing about something. When Mark saw me, he nudged his lawyer and pointed me out. He leaned in and whispered something. Croft looked over at me and smirked. Eleanor just glared, her face a mask of triumph. They looked so confident, so sure of their victory. I felt a cold, calm certainty settle over me. Their downfall was going to be glorious. I walked past them without a word and entered the courtroom. I took a seat at the respondent's table. Mark, his lawyer, and his mother sat at the petitioner's table opposite me. Mark kept looking over at me, a smug smile playing on his lips. He leaned over to his mother and said, in a stage whisper I was clearly meant to hear, "Look at her, sitting there all alone. She probably could not even find a lawyer to take her case." "This is going to be easier than I thought," Eleanor giggled, a high, unpleasant sound. I ignored them. I opened my briefcase and took out a single, neatly organized file. I placed it on the table in front of me. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on top of the file, and I waited. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge entered. Her name was Judge Albright, a woman in her late 50s with a reputation for being sharp, fair, and having no patience for nonsense. I knew her well. We had faced each other in court several times over the years, on opposite sides of complex cases when she was still a practicing attorney. We had a professional respect for one another. She sat down and looked over the docket. "Case number 734, Peterson versus Evans," she announced. "I see Mr. Peterson is represented by Mr. Croft. And Ms. Evans, are you representing yourself today?" This was the moment the entire game would change. I stood up. I looked directly at Judge Albright. "I am, Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and steady. The judge looked at me, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She smiled faintly. "Ms. Evans," she said, her voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "It is good to see you again, though I am sorry it is under these circumstances. For the record, please state your full name and professional title." I kept my eyes on the judge, but I could feel the gazes of Mark, Eleanor, and their lawyer burning into me. "Chloe Evans, Your Honor," I said. "Senior counsel at the firm of Blackwood, Finch, and Associates." There was a sharp intake of breath from the other table. I did not look. I did not have to. I could feel the shock radiating across the room. I could picture the smug look being wiped from Mark's face. I could imagine the blood draining from Eleanor's. I had just dropped a bomb, and the silence in the room was the sound of the fallout. Judge Albright nodded. "Very well, counsel. Please be seated." I sat down. I risked a quick glance at the other table. Mark was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, sickening horror. Eleanor was clutching her pearls, her face a mask of pure shock. Stephen Croft, the smug lawyer, was looking back and forth between me and his client, a look of professional panic on his face. He had just realized he had walked into an ambush. He had prepared for a simple divorce case against a downtrodden, unrepresented housewife. He was now facing one of the top fraud litigators in the state. Judge Albright cleared her throat, bringing the room back to attention. "Mr. Croft," she said, "you may begin with your opening statement." Croft stood up, visibly flustered. He shuffled his papers, trying to regain his composure. "Yes, Your Honor," he stammered. "Your Honor, we are here today because my client, Mr. Peterson, has been forced to file for divorce due to the erratic and irresponsible behavior of his wife, Ms. Evans. Over the past year, Ms. Evans has become emotionally unstable, and her profligate spending has put the couple in significant financial jeopardy. As evidence, we would like to present a loan document for $50,000 taken out solely in Ms. Evans's name, without my client's knowledge or consent." He slid a document across the table. Judge Albright looked at the document, then at me. "Ms. Evans," she said. "Your response?" I stood up again. I picked up my file. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm and measured. "My husband's claims are not just false. They are part of a deliberate and malicious campaign of fraud, theft, and defamation designed to leave me destitute. The man sitting at that table is a thief and a forger." There was a gasp from Eleanor. Mark jumped to his feet. "That's a lie," he shouted. "Mr. Peterson, sit down and be quiet, or I will have you removed for contempt," Judge Albright said, her voice like ice. Mark sank back into his chair, his face red with anger and fear. I continued as if nothing had happened. "Your Honor, the loan in question was not taken out by me. It was taken out by Mr. Peterson. And he did it to cover up the $50,000 he had just stolen from our joint savings account. A theft which is part of a much larger pattern of financial abuse. Over the past 5 years, Mr. Peterson has systematically embezzled over $250,000 from our marital assets and hidden it in a secret, offshore account."
Croft was on his feet now.
"Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making wild, unsubstantiated accusations." "Is that so, Mr. Croft?" I said, turning to him with a cold smile. "Then perhaps you can explain these." I walked over to the clerk and handed her a stack of documents. "Let the record show I am submitting bank statements from a secret account in Mr. Peterson's name, along with the corresponding transfer authorizations from our joint account. Authorizations which, you will note, bear my forged signature." I handed a copy to Croft. He snatched them from my hand and began to flip through them, his face growing paler with every page. Mark was trying to see, craning his neck. Eleanor looked like she was going to faint. "Your Honor," I continued, my voice ringing with authority, "I have forensic handwriting analysis confirming that the signatures on these documents are not mine. I also have detailed financial records tracing every single stolen dollar from our joint accounts to Mr. Peterson's personal investment portfolio. A portfolio he used to purchase a condominium in another city. A condominium he was planning to move into after he had successfully completed his plan to ruin me." I let that sink in. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of papers as Judge Albright examined the documents. She looked up, her eyes hard. "Mr. Croft," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Do you have a response to this?" Croft was sweating. He looked at Mark, who was shaking his head, his face a mess of denial and panic. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. My client can explain everything." "Oh, I am sure he can," I said. "But I would rather he explain it under oath. Or perhaps we should just listen to him explain it in his own words." I pulled a small digital recorder from my briefcase. "Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence to submit. This is a recording of my husband, made just last week. On it, you will hear him bragging to his mother, who is also present in this courtroom, about his entire plan. You will hear him admit to the theft. You will hear him admit to the forgeries. And you will hear him laugh about how he was going to leave me buried in debt because, and I quote, she can't even afford a lawyer." I placed the recorder on the table. The silence in the room was absolute. Mark stared at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. The color had completely drained from his face. He looked at his mother, his eyes wide with terror. Eleanor looked like she had seen a ghost. Stephen Croft slowly sat down in his chair. He put his head in his hands. He knew the game was over. He had been played, and he had lost. Judge Albright looked at Mark. Her expression was one of utter disgust. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice colder than a winter storm, "is there anything you would like to say before I play this recording for the court? And I advise you to think very, very carefully about your answer." Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just sat there, frozen, a pathetic statue of a man whose world had just crumbled around him. He had laughed at me. He had called me simple. He had underestimated me at every turn. And now, in the cold, clear light of a courtroom, he was finally seeing me for who I really was. And he was terrified. The judge did not need to play the recording. The look on his face was a confession in itself. The case was over, and I had won. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Mark. Faced with irrefutable evidence of felony fraud and forgery, Stephen Croft advised his client to settle immediately and unconditionally. There was no negotiation. My terms were simple and non-negotiable. I would receive 100% of all marital assets, including the house, the cars, and the full value of our shared investment accounts. Mark would be required to liquidate his secret accounts and his new condo and transfer the entire sum to me to compensate for the money he had stolen and the emotional distress he had caused. In addition, he would be responsible for all legal fees, both his and mine, though I generously waived my own. Finally, in exchange for his full compliance, I would agree not to press criminal charges. It was a complete and total capitulation. He signed the papers without a word, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. The day the divorce was finalized, I had one last conversation with him. We met in a sterile conference room at his lawyer's office to sign the last of the documents. He looked like a ghost. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes.
He would not look at me.
When it was all over, he finally spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Why?" he asked, looking at the table. "Why did you do all this?" I looked at him, at this man who is now a stranger to me. I felt no pity. I felt no anger. I felt nothing at all. "You did this, Mark," I said, my voice calm and even. "You did this when you decided I was a fool. You did this when you forged my name. You did this when you laughed at my imagined weakness. You built this prison for yourself." I just locked the door. I stood up and walked out of the room without looking back. The aftermath rippled through his family. Eleanor became a social pariah. The story of her complicity in her son's schemes spread like wildfire through their social circle. Her friends stopped calling. She was disinvited from her various charity boards. Her perfect world, built on a foundation of status and appearances, had crumbled. The last I heard, she had sold her large house and moved into a small apartment, her pride and her reputation in tatters. His sister, Jessica, called me a week after the hearing. She was crying. "Chloe, I am so sorry," she sobbed into the phone. "I had no idea. I mean, I knew he was buying a condo, but I did not know about the money. I never would have gone along with it if I had known. Did you not think it was strange that he was buying a new home without his wife's knowledge?" I asked, my voice cold.
I
did not think about it," she stammered. "Mark can be very persuasive. He told me you two were having problems and that you had agreed to a trial separation." "He lied to you, Jessica," I said. "Just like he lied to me. He used you just like he used me. The only difference is that you were a willing participant." "Please," she begged. "Is there anything I can do?" "Yes," I said. "You can lose my number," and I hung up the phone. I had no room in my new life for enablers and cowards. My friend Sarah, on the other hand, was ecstatic. She took me out for a celebratory dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city. "I have to hand it to you, Chloe," she said, raising her glass of champagne. "I have seen a lot of messy divorces, but I have never seen a more elegant, brutal, and utterly satisfying takedown in my entire career. You did not just beat him. You annihilated him." "He annihilated himself," I said, taking a sip of my champagne. "I just provided the legal framework." We talked for hours about my plans for the future, about the new life I was building for myself. I was selling the house, the one filled with so many bad memories. I was planning a long trip, a chance to travel and see the world, something Mark had always been against. For the first time in a decade, I felt free. I felt light. I felt like myself again. As I settled into my new life, I realized the most valuable thing I had gained was not the money or the house. It was the return of my own self-respect. I had spent so long diminishing myself, making myself smaller to keep the peace, that I had almost forgotten who I was. The woman who had faced down my husband in that courtroom was not a new person. She was the person I had been all along, hidden under layers of compromise and accommodation. Mark's betrayal, as painful as it was, had been a gift. It had forced me to reclaim my own power. A few months later, I was in court for a major case for my firm. It was a complex fraud trial, and I was cross-examining the defendant, a CEO who thought he was too smart to get caught. As I methodically dismantled his lies on the stand, I happened to glance at the back of the courtroom. And I saw him. Mark. He was sitting in the public gallery, watching me. He looked older, defeated. He was no longer the confident, arrogant man I had married. He was just a spectator, a ghost from a past life. He was watching me in my element, in the world where I was strong, where I was respected, where I was feared. He was finally seeing the woman he had been married to for 10 years, the woman he had never bothered to know. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Regret? Awe? Fear? It did not matter. I turned my attention back to the witness on the stand. I had a job to do. I had a case to win. He had made the mistake of thinking my life revolved around him. He never understood that he was just a case. A difficult, personal case, but a case nonetheless. And it was a case I had closed. He thought my greatest weakness was not having a lawyer. He never imagined my greatest strength was being won. And he would spend the rest of his life paying for that mistake.